Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Matt. So this is, I guess, a bit of a random one after the other talks that we've had today. This is, I guess, some research that looked at a smaller scale problem. So and really came about during COVID. And I guess one of the reasons I thought it might fit in for this conference, this workshop, is really not all research impact has to be like massive scale policy change. And sometimes you can have impact by doing sort of smaller scale, and in this case unfunded studies, but actually tackling a problem which is a big concern to horse owners and seemed quite topical at the time we did the study. So yeah, I'll explain what happened. So as some background, this study was UK based, and the UK has a network of public footpaths and rights of way going all across countryside in sort of rural areas, more urban areas, and often where people keep their horses actually is sort of adjacent to some of these footpaths. So during the first lockdown in the COVID pandemic in the UK, there's sort of some evidence that human exercising habits were changing. And people seem to be going out and about and using paths perhaps they hadn't before, or using them in a different way, so sort of for recreation rather than to get A to B, get to work or something. So this started raising some red flags, and we sort of saw some posts on social media about, people getting out and about. But then it comes to the horse side of things. So some background on horses for those of you less familiar. Equines are trickle feeders, so they generally live on sort of high fibre, very low quality vegetation, and their digestive system is actually very sensitive. They can't actually physically be sick, so anything they eat that's inappropriate has to go right the way through their digestive tract. And sort of them picking up inappropriate food actually poses quite a big risk for their health and their welfare. So partway into the COVID, I'm thinking, so we got locked down in March 2020, and I'm thinking it was April, May, when we started seeing headlines like this. So this was very much in the equestrian press, but gradually we started seeing sort of more mainstream news and media outlets. Sorry, I've got the cough that's going around. Picking up on these stories too. So lots and lots and lots of reports about horses either getting seriously ill or dying after people that are out walking in lockdown, either leaving food behind, leaving rubbish behind, perhaps forgetting to shut gates behind them. And so it really seemed that we were having this sort of little mini pandemic of horse-related problems due to human behaviour change because of COVID pandemic. So as you do when you're sort of a researcher trapped in your own home, my awesome master's student at the time, Amelia, decided that we should probably investigate what's going on here, whether this is related to COVID, and what general horse owner experience is about this. There's obviously one thought was maybe it's just hitting the mainstream news, not because it's picked up in frequency, but more because there's literally nothing else to talk about apart from lockdown. So that was our sort of research question. We were also concerned, obviously, this is an animal welfare issue, but it's also very much a human welfare issue, because this was having a devastating impact on these people, equally causing problems for the environment and for local wildlife. So it was quite a big issue at the time. And in our little lockdown bubble, it felt very significant. So we decided to do an online survey of horse owners, and we basically just put it out there saying, has anyone experienced either people feeding their horses without their permission or interfering with their horses in any way? For example, leaving gates open or leaving things in fields. As I said, this wasn't part of any kind of funded project, but we approached the British Horse Society and basically said, like, we're really interested in this. Would you help us? And they've been absolutely fantastic. So they supported us in trying to recruit participants, and also press releases, liaising with different sort of equestrian media and with our National sort of Equine Welfare Council. So we had this survey open for 1 month, August to September 2020. And yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, that there was likely to be a biased sample of participants. So people who had this problem would possibly be more likely to respond. But we did find that 7% of our just over 1,000 participants had either found evidence that someone had fed their horse without their permission or suspected that someone had, including items being left in that horse's field. I think what was quite staggering was just the sheer volume range of things that were being left in horses' fields. So there's sort of the common things you might expect, like apples and carrots, and maybe some mince, but also things like lawn mowings, which are really not a good idea to feed to horses. We had some being fed Chinese takeaways. There were Sunday roasts left in fields, sandwiches still in packaging. And several people actually reported it looked like someone had been emptying sort of their kitchen waste bin. So all their potato peelings, carrot peelings, bits of leftover food were just sort of ending up in all these horses' fields. So while some of it you might think, well, if you're having a picnic, they might have just left some food behind, other people seem to be going out their way to actually deliver food to different people's horses. 28% of the respondents reported that their horse had been fed or ingested food that wasn't appropriate and actually become unwell or injured as a result, with 50% of those requiring veterinary treatment. And I think just to really emphasize, it's not particularly what the animal's being fed, but the impact on that individual horse and that particular situation. So one owner sadly lost their horse because someone had basically just picked some grass off a nearby verge, not appreciating that the council had been spraying it and actually poisoned the horse. So, and that was the only reason that the vet could think of that had actually led to this horse sadly having to be put to sleep. We wanted to use our findings as a force for good to work with the VHS to try and raise awareness of this as an issue. So we were quite interested in who was seen to be doing this with horses, and our respondents reported the most common group were typically families, so it's adults with children. Not all of the respondents, but a fair few of them had actually managed to catch people in the act of feeding their horses, and actually ask them what they were doing and why they were doing it. Nearly half of those approached thought they were doing absolutely nothing wrong, and many mentioned that they'd actually gone and fed local horses when they were a child, and they were just sort of giving their children the same pleasure. But positively, 42% were quite receptive when owners actually explained why it's not a good idea to do this, and actually seemed sort of to agree that, yeah, that's a bad idea. They can understand now why the owner was asking them not to do it. So that was a positive finding. We also asked about the use of signage on owners' fields and found that owners typically had quite a mixed experience of signs. A lot said the sort of more generic signs didn't work, but people that had taken time to make a personalised sign with a photo of that particular horse and explain that particular horse's situation had sort of better success. And this was particularly the case for horses that were perhaps on restricted grazing. So in the UK, we've got a bit of an equine obesity epidemic. So our horses are all quite fat. And during the sort of spring, summer, autumn, when there's more grass, some owners use restricted grazing practices to try and reduce their horses' intake to minimise this weight gain. But for someone that's not familiar with equestrianism and equines, it can look like these horses are basically being left without food or without enough food when considering the amount of grass around. So signs seem to be particularly effective for some of these owners, that they can say, well, actually, this horse we're watching their weight, and that's the reason why the horse's environment looks like that. So like I said, it was really important for us to work with the BHS to try and get our findings out there and use them to actually raise awareness in the public. So we sort of liaised with the press office at the BHS. We did sort of radio programs, we did some media coverage, And most importantly, I think we use the findings to provide an evidence base for their ongoing campaign activity to target this area. So one of those activities was the creation of an awareness raising video. So this is available on YouTube. That's QR code will take you to the link. And this sort of is a short video, but basically it showed the parallel stories of two different families, one with a horse and one without, and how their days unfold along the same lines. So the family without a horse were going for a picnic with their dog, and ended up leaving some of their food in the horse's field with the horse owned by the other family. So it was the impact that had on that horse afterwards. And I think we sort of tried to combine a bit sort of subtle messaging. So the feeding family basically wouldn't let a stranger feed their dog, but then they went and fed someone else's horse. So it's those different standards. And it's quite emotional because at the end of the video, the BHS had asked for anyone who'd be willing to share their horse's story. Sorry, that's the cough. Okay, I'm there. But basically, so it's got real life accounts at the end of it of experiences people had, whether either the horse was seriously ill or they lost their horse due to this happening. The second part of the campaign that we were involved in is the development of hopefully more effective signage. And for this, we drew on our result findings that we sort of understood the demographic might be more families, and also drew on not only human behaviour change science and sort of models from health research, but also those used by sort of wildlife campaigners and zoos where sort of feeding of those animals is discouraged. And that sort of switches it around into a more positive way. So you're thanking someone for not feeding rather than saying, don't you feed our horse, which could often generate quite a defensive reaction. So the BHS have recently launched their new signs. We've got the sort of some brief reasons so people can actually try to understand why people are saying that, but also a QR code where people can go for further information. And that sort of, again, came out of the comments in our survey that people, were open to not doing it if they understood the reasoning behind that. So lastly, just to really looking at the time, we've got an ongoing collaboration with the BHS and we're still working with them on this campaign. There was a change in the countryside code as sort of a result of some of the issues that came out around lockdown. So in April 2021, there was actually a specific reminder included in the code not to feed livestock, horses or wild animals, which was really, really good to see. And like I said, the BHS campaign is ongoing and you can find more information about it on their webpage. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Excellent. Thanks ever so much, Jo. So if you don't mind, because we've got another session afterwards, we need to get the break done. There were a couple of questions in the chat, but maybe you could address them in the chat during or after the break if you're staying, if that would be okay, just so that we can, because we've got another hour and a half and it's already been quite a long session. But thanks very much. That was really interesting. I think what was great about it as well is showing how you actually achieve the impact by the videos and stuff. So it was great. Exactly what we want for this workshop. Excellent. So we will step into the final break and we will see everybody back at 30 minutes past whatever hour it is in whichever country you're in.